I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular Board of Education meeting for the Zumwalt School District. If you would stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Roll call, Mrs. Brady.
Greg.
Yes.
Gabriel. Erica. Yes. Mike.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Tommy.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes. Thank you very much. Need a motion to adopt the agenda that you have before you this evening? Howard, second. Callahan, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on, recognition. Dr. DeBray, we have a couple tonight.
We have two presentations. The first is from the American Heart Association. Cheryl Stedgoki is here, and I don't know, Cheryl, are you bringing someone else up?
I will in about 2 minutes. I'll
Okay.
thank you guys for what the district's done, and then I will spotlight one of our favorite
Okay.
students. So, as Dr. Gray said, good evening. I'm Cheryl Stedgoki with the American Heart Association. I know you're pressed for time, so I'll just take a few minutes, but wanted to thank the district. Jump Rope for Heart has been the name for 40 years. We changed to Kids Heart Challenge. We want the kids to challenge themselves more than just jumping rope, making healthier choices and staying active. Last year, we pushed through a mission called Finn's Mission, one of our little survivors, where the kids could watch videos at home with their families and learn hands-only CPR and learn the signs of stroke. So very excited to say that over 254 families in the district took the challenge last year and learned all those. So we're pushing it again this year so that we can continue to share with those families how to stay healthier together. And very excited to share that Zumwalt was the #1 district in the state for raising awareness to American Heart Disease. Very excited. I have two schools that I wanted to spotlight just real quick. St. Peter's Elementary and Westoff. They had their best years ever, where St. Peter's raised over $19,000 and Westoff raised over $17,000. So with that, I'm going to ask Jen Clymer to come on up real quick, and she's going to bring Charlie, our #1 student in the district. And he was the #2 student in the state of Missouri to raise awareness. He raised over do you remember how much he raised? You don't remember. All right, Jen's going to talk with Charlie real quick so he's a little more comfortable with her.
Okay, so this is Charlie. My guys and Charlie stepped up huge. Westoff more than tripled our last year's total and more than doubled Westoff's highest year in its 20 years. Charlie wanted to make a difference, and he wanted to help kids around the same age as him. He was responsible for close to a quarter of what Westoff raised. And what Charlie and the Westoff community pulled off was nothing short of a miracle, especially in the face of the pandemic. With all this being said, and with Charlie's help, Fort Zumwalt was #1 in the state. So, if I can turn the page. Goodness. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the #1 heart hero for all of the public schools in the state of Missouri, and my personal hero, Charlie Johnson.
Because you raised over $4,500. That money has to go somewhere, right? So what it does is right now we have 62 research studies. So remember how we study in science about research? 62 of those studies we're putting over $10 million in just in the 7 hospitals around the area. So have you ever been to the hospital or doctor? All right, so know that that money that you raised is helping kids and moms and dads and parents right in this area, okay? So we are very proud of you, okay? So thank you. We hope to have another successful year again this year, and I'm raising awareness. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. That's right here. Jen, do you want to hold your applause for that picture real quick?
There we go.
Ready, smile?
Did you get one more?
Yes. Okay, you're awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next, Diane Papa George, one of our alumni, retirees, whatever you want to call her, longtime art teacher in the school district. And who else do we have?
Carol Ransom.
Carol Ransom, principal for the district. Why don't you two come forward? And Debbie Duran with Special Olympics, I think, is going to come up and bring some of her students with you.
JB Meddy as well.
And Debbie's on my committee. Yes.
She pulled me in.
Oh, look at you.
Hi guys. Oh my gosh, look at these athletes.
Oh,
All right,
yay.
let's come this way.
I don't know which way. You got it, okay. My name is Diane Papageorge, and I head up the committee, which my committee is, these are half of them. And we do the annual golf tournament for the Fort Zumwalt, and we did, this is our 20th year. And we are really proud to raise money to give to the Special Olympics for their uniforms. And I can see they're really beautiful.
Well, actually, these are our old uniforms. We have new ones coming very soon.
Yes, you
And
do.
we are really, really excited. We've got them all picked out and everything else, so we're super excited. These are a little worn, so we definitely could use some new uniforms.
It just so happens we bumped up the money that we give you, and we're giving you $3,500. Because we raised enough money to give you extra.
Wow, thank you
I'm
so much.
really excited. I'm very proud of you guys, and it was a very good cause, and we will keep doing the golf tournament.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
Laura, you got pictures?
Thank you.
You got it?
Alright, got pictures? Okay.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you so much.
See you, Diane. See you, Carol.
Bye, Bernie. Congratulations. Great. Bye, guys. Bye.
All right, next item on the agenda is comments from the audience, and I have a few tonight, so we're gonna ask that you keep your comments within 3 minutes. Again, don't expect the board would refrain from responding. Some of you have already provided us with your notes, and I appreciate that. Let's begin tonight with Jamie Buckner, FZEA President.
Good evening. I just wanted to talk to the board about the committee that the district and FZEA established as a result of negotiations last year. We've met, and I think we had a pretty amazing committee, and it was just so refreshing to leave our first committee meeting. I felt like we all had a really big voice in the committee. It was so nice to not only talk about concerns, but to brainstorm possible solutions and also talk about what was going well with our program. And I really look forward to seeing what comes out of the committee and how that impacts our educators across the district, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Jamie. Andrea Miller.
All right, hello. So I'm Andrea Miller. I work at Fort Zumwalt North Middle School right across the street. And so we had some friends come and help us. And we really deeply appreciate everything that you're doing. I'm one of the sponsors for the GSA, for the Gender Sexuality Alliance. And so just truly deeply appreciate all the effort that has gone into and all the people who have helped out. And I have like thank you notes to write and everything else, but after I say that, I'm like, I can't even read it because it's so cute. But I'll just read one. So one of my kids, they're just amazing children. And so this club is one of the few places where I feel truly accepted and open to be myself. And I think this club is an amazing opportunity for people to become friends. Many people would be devastated if we were to lose this club. So I'm just gonna leave it there. But I appreciate your time and thank you so very much. Mr. Emmons and Ms. Powers and Mr. Holmes were all there and lots of other wonderful people, but thank you very much. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Bingham.
Here to talk about a similar topic. I'm a Fort Zumwalt East alum from the class of 2016, and more important for why I'm here, I was one of the founding members of the Fort Zumwalt East GSA, which at the time was the Gay Straight Alliance. The GSA, I joined it for the same reason you join most clubs, which was it's an easy way to meet new people and because there was free food at the first meeting. I spent 4 years in the GSA going to meetings whenever I could. I went to every single meeting my first 2 years, a little less as I got busier later in my education, but I want to dispel any misconceptions about what clubs like the GSA are about. They're not about pushing an agenda, it's not political. It's simply a place for kids to go and be themselves and know that no matter what, they are accepted by their peers there, and if they're having a tough week, they're getting picked on or struggling with classes or whatever, they can come, hang out, eat food, and just talk about TV or movies or whatever and know that they are accepted for who they are. The topic of sex or anything like that never once came up in the 4 years I was going to meetings. Vast majority of the time it was just us hanging out, eating food, and talking about whatever TV shows were on that week or sports. It was simply just making sure that we got to meet people we might have otherwise not have gotten a chance to interact with. And it was making sure that everybody knew that they had a community around them and that they weren't alone. So I encourage you to support more clubs and organizations like the GSA.
Thank you, sir. Bailey? I'm sorry, I can't read your writing, Bailey.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My last name is Porteous.
Porteous. Okay.
I am a senior at Fort Zumwalt North, and I'm also here to talk on the topic of GSA. I have a letter written by a peer of mine, who will stay anonymous for their safety. Dear Board of Education, in regards to this ban on an LGBT+ friendly club or rainbow club in the Fort Zumwalt North Middle School, I have to say I'm appalled to the greatest degree. It is hard enough for students in middle school to find themselves to take away a club aimed at helping inform them on the matter of who they are and helping spread acceptance of those who have found themselves a part of the community. It's absolutely disgusting. I find myself not a part of the community, but I have so many friends who have been bullied, beaten, and segregated by their peers, and to be able to find a place to feel at home and feel accepted has been life-saving. I understand the issue of inappropriate topics is risky, but I believe that having a president or a staff member there will help dissolve anything that even might appear, but in my experience, we've never had anything inappropriate come up. I hope you come to understand just how much this club means to some students and find it in your heart to allow them to accept what they deserve. I have also written that, so why take away a home for many students? The goal of schools is to teach, but also to house students, so having a rainbow club is a part of that. Many kids do not feel safe in their own home, so having a place to call home is important. These students do not need a therapist to watch over the club, they just need a staff member with an open heart and mind. So allow kids to feel at home, protect your kids. Thank you for listening. I hope this impacts your decision on the Rainbow GSA Club at many other schools that might not have one, or any middle schools that may not have one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Durbin?
Good evening, board. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Durbin. I have 2 kids in the school district and a whole lot of family in the district. And at last month's meeting, kind of along the same lines, it was discussed the allowing of this, I guess, gay, gender-sensitive club in our middle schools. And so I think it was called the GSA Club. And the way I saw it was being pushed under a false pretense of offering a safe space. If our school administrators are doing their jobs, which I think you are, our schools are already a safe place for all kids, not just certain kids in certain, categories. So I and many parents, we oppose these clubs in pushing an agenda on our kids. I know last month I spoke on a different topic, and I said that using tax dollars and the platform of our schools to push these agendas on our kids are wrong. The GSA Club, it's a concerted effort to promote and normalize homosexuality and gender confusion with our youngest kids. These are middle schoolers, 12 years old, some of them. So, our schools have two responsibilities, and I think we're getting away from that too much. One is to keep our kids safe when they're under your charge, and the second is to give them an unbiased, world-class education. That's it, period. I mean, that is the job of our schools. That's it. And I think that, I'm not sure why we're getting away from this, but the responsibility and the right to help our kids form their beliefs and morals, that's the parents' job. That's our right as parents. Okay, and I think it's extremely arrogant for the schools to believe that somehow it's your right and your job, because it's not. So last month I noticed, and I was very visibly noticed, that many of you opposed the GSA in our middle school. I could tell it. I could see that you visibly opposed it, but I could also see that you visibly were very scared to push back against the people that are pushing this. And yes, you'll probably be canceled. Yes, they'll probably try to destroy your career. You may have people that, threaten violence. The teachers union will be all over you. But why were you elected? Was it to give in to a liberal agenda, or was it to protect our kids and the values of the parents and the families in our school district? So I am here just to urge you to say no to this club in our middle schools. We really want our kids to be educated, not indoctrinated, just educated. That's all. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Sir. Thank you.
Good evening. Normally I like to be very structured with these things, but I'll be honest, I've been in the car with my kids for 10 hours today, so I wasn't even sure I was going to be coming. So I wanted to talk about the dead horse in the room and mention COVID for the first time here tonight. And I know it's beating at it, but I want to urge that we continue down the path that we're going on. We've had great numbers so far. I'm very, very positive about how that has been going, and having the mask optional has been wonderful for my kids' sanity and for their social structural education on that point. Two of my kids are in special classes that require seeing mouths in order to function at their education levels. So for them to have masks on, put them both in regression last year. So that was very difficult for us to work through, and they've been doing much better this year. So thank you so much for allowing that. I wanted to just mention that I'd love to see the continuation of that going forward and removing the mandates, removing the quarantines. If kids are sick, by all means, stay home. I don't want a sick kid in class. But flu, strep, that kind of thing. So you get a letter in the backpack or an email in your inbox to inform you, and if you're uncomfortable, you could take your kids out, and that would be fine. They shouldn't be punished for making sure that their kids are pulled out and away from any future spread in the classroom. But for those that aren't sick, I would love to see them make sure that they still get an education and that they're still in classes. So that is it, under 3 minutes. So fantastic. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Becky. Arnie Dinoff.
Thank you, members of the Board of Education. My name is Arnie A.C. Dinoff. I'm a resident of the district and running for the Board of Education in April. The first issue I'd like to address is the meeting venue. As you all know, Chapter 610 is very clear and concise. This district is 19,000 students, about 145 to 150,000 residents. We have outgrown this room. I don't understand why you don't have it at auditoriums at the 4 high schools or the middle schools. You need to have venues that will create or that will accept the anticipated crowds for these meetings. Everybody has to have accessibility. You don't want to be the loner that's sitting out there in the lobby because you're closed out of a meeting in a small confined space. Number 2, accessibility. I've become temporarily disabled with a broken humerus bone, and so I have really shined up and taken really light to accessibility. When I came to this meeting last month, it was a struggle to get in the 2 doors, especially with the wind. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, in this day and age is a far crying shame that the administration center to this building doesn't have automatic door assists that are put in by the district. You spend on an annual basis millions upon millions of dollars of wasteful spending, but you don't want to tackle the ADA challenges of this district. And I think that that's a shame. So I challenge you to put in door assist at the 2 doors of the front of this building to make sure that it's handicap accessible and meets every rigid code of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Out-of-state representation. The people of this district were very clear and concise when they elected every member of this Board of Education. They expect you to be a district and be part of the community on a daily basis, not a month, not one day a month. A board member, Mr. Edmonds, lives in Windermere, Orange County, Florida. It's now been over 6 months, and there's a clear violation of United States federal law. I've been in discussions with the United States District Attorney's Office in downtown St. Louis, and I asked Mr. Edmonds not to vote on any decisions. It would be in violation of the National Voter Act of 1993, known as the NVRA Act. It requires, after 6 months of an inhabitant of another state or location, for you to register where you live to be a registered voter of that county in that jurisdiction. It now has become a federal crime. I am calling for an investigation and canvass of the St. Charles County Election Authority and the St. Charles County Prosecutor, Tim Lohmeyer.
Your time's up, Mr. Dino.
And I ask you to really consider the bond issue. Now is not the time. If you look at what Francis Howell did, their building went from 73 million to 190 million.
Thank you, Mr.
And I ask you
Dino.
to really consider that. Thank you.
April Rivera.
Good evening. I wanted to start off by thanking you all for your time and your attention. I know this is a busy time of year, and I appreciate all the effort you've put in this year and the work that you've done to ensure that our school is an example of excellence. There are a number of issues that I would rather discuss, and you probably would too, other than COVID, but COVID is not going away. In fact, it is getting worse. According to the agenda tonight, Dr. DeBray is requesting to remove many of the remaining mitigation measures at our disposal. It is important that the 7 of you realize that you are our duly elected officials, and it is your power to maintain, remove, or amend policies. It is no one else's, it's yours. So this is your decision tonight. My concerns have always been to keep all of the children safe and in school. I did virtual learning with my children last year, and I can tell you that they did not learn as well or as much at home virtually. The children need to be in school. My children are fully vaccinated and they wear masks. It was my hope that they could remove their masks like everyone else, but the new variant is so contagious that for now we're going to stick with them and do what all of the medical professionals are asking us to do. All right. Things will only get better if we start helping the situation, and that is not what we have been doing. Okay, we have collectively, as a group, not been helping ourselves. If we have required masks, there would be less infection and less quarantining. It could simplify this entire situation. But you, with the power and the pressures that you've had, have chosen to go against the health department guidance. And you're going to be asked to do that again tonight. As much as I would like to request for you to ask for masking, I understand that the pressures that you're under. So I would just merely like to ask that you keep the positions that you've held in the past. No changes. I'm very concerned that if we remove these minimal protections, that we might not be able to handle what's coming in the winter with all of the other germs that we have going on, and I'm afraid that schools will end up closing come March. I would like to keep all of the schools open. I'm sure you would all like to too. Things that we have in place have helped. Please keep them there, okay? You have the power and authority to keep our children safe in school, so please keep those security measures in place. Thank you.
Jamie LoCastro.
Hello. My giant suitcase on the floor.
I just first want to say how proud I am of the kids who stood up and shared their experience and their support of the Rainbow Club tonight. That takes more guts than some people here have. I'm Jamie LaCastro and I'm a parent to 2 kids in the district. I'm sure you're sick of hearing from me, and rest assured I'm kind of tired of getting up here month after month, asking for the most basic of safety measures during a pandemic that is still killing 1,000 people a day. I'm here to ask why you're proposing to remove what little mitigation we currently have in place, especially on the verge of a surging variant. I suppose we're going to be told that you have no choice in the matter with AG Schmidt's threats. Well, that is BS, because you do have a choice. And if you don't know that, then you either haven't been advised properly, or perhaps you welcome it as cover. But educational lawyers and even our own county prosecutor have gone on record stating that the AG's threat is empty, and that the case he cites does not pertain to you as elected school officials. You and you alone have the authority to set the local policy for our school district, and you were elected and entrusted with providing a safe and equitable learning environment. Are we to accept the insinuation that COVID deserves the same treatment as lice or strep when it comes to contagious disease? That we don't need to quarantine exposed kids when up to 40% of cases are asymptomatic? These kids can and will unknowingly spread the virus to their classmates and families. And the reality is that currently a parent does already have a choice to prevent quarantining. Under the current plan, they can mask and or vaccinate their kids and do modified quarantine. And yet another option to consider in our district would be to implement a program such as Test to Stay. By dropping quarantine and contact tracing completely, you will be sending asymptomatic positive kids back into school, likely with no masks, to freely and easily spread a very contagious virus to other kids and families. Kids don't live alone. In addition, you'll be putting an awful lot of trust in parents to not send kids to school sick. And if you don't think that already happens, please ask a school nurse, or take a look at some of the parent association pages in our county where people openly discuss how they can cheat and defy school rules they don't agree with. Make no mistake, if you remove quarantine and contact tracing, you will be contributing to more kids and more families in our district getting sick. I imagine that I speak for more than just myself when I say I'm tired of doing the whole damn group project. This is an extraordinary time, and we are on the verge of a potentially unprecedented surge due to the Omicron variant. This requires thoughtful and proactive temporary measures. Are you really willing to leave next to no mitigation in place to protect district families? Well, I'm not, and I expect more of you, and our kids and our staff deserve more. Please step up and do the job that you were elected to do, that you can do. Please vote to keep our current mitigation strategies of contact tracing, quarantine, and the metrics for the thresholds in place until we get past this next surge. Thank you.
Amy Robertson.
On December 10th, County Representative Joe Brazel wrote to our county decision makers and indicated, quote, "I would like to know who will enforce the law in this case when schools continue to break the law." This request was made in reference to the AG's cease and desist letter sent to school districts demanding that our elected Board of Education representatives be stripped of any and all ability to adequately and effectively protect our school communities against communicable diseases, specifically including, but certainly not limited to, COVID-19. County Attorney Tim Lomar responded, "I'm going to give you my honest opinion, politics aside. I believe the AG is misinterpreting the Cole County ruling. I don't believe that this case has any binding effect on local legislative bodies such as school boards. A cease and desist letter from the AG is not law, period." In his recommendations attached to tonight's meeting agenda, Dr. Jabray acknowledges that our own district attorney also believes the Cole County ruling does not apply to school boards, but then goes on to say that we're going to comply anyway. His recommended policy loosely mentions monitoring for cases and, quote, "If positive numbers would increase at a concerning rate, mitigation strategies, including masks, would be implemented where and when appropriate," end quote. There is no definitive mention of metrics or specifics regarding what is considered a concerning rate. Decisions regarding the health and safety of our school community have, on occasion, been made as a result of leadership bending under the constant pressure and sometimes bullying from those who firmly believe that COVID is done and that everyone should have absolute freedom to do what they want, when they want, and where they want without any consideration of those around them. Now, at a time when we're seeing an increase in COVID cases and when we know many will be returning from weeks of parties during which everyone shares the same eggnog before coming back into schools, we are going to bend to the whims of an AG who has no governing power over our elected Board of Education representatives. Schmidt is using bullying tactics and coercion by allowing our state treasurer to attach funding to full compliance. At some point, the government overreach has to stop to allow room for safety, health, and common sense to prevail. The time is now to stand up to the bullies. Keep in mind that these policies would apply not only to COVID, but to other communicable diseases should there be an outbreak. Are we really prepared to strip our district's governing board of the ability to protect our children and community? I am not asking for a mask mandate, but instead for clear metrics to be defined, at which point the board agrees to convene and immediately discuss and implement needed mitigation. I'm not asking for out-of-school quarantines for children who are exposed at school, but instead for the consideration of masking for exposed kids when schools reach a specified trigger rate, and for parents to have the right to be explicitly informed if their child is a close contact to a positive case. This would allow them to make an informed decision regarding whether or not they wish to have their child tested. I am not asking for the removal of anyone's right to attend school without a mask or vaccination, but instead for the implementation of policies built to keep everyone safely in school. Before agreeing to bend to the whims of a government bully and choosing to accept Dr. DeBray's recommendation, I would respectfully request that this board take time to seek more creative problem solving.
Heather Mudd.
Good evening. Due to time constraints, I'm going to skip the pleasantries. The 7 of you are elected representatives with a very specific task: to provide appropriate management of this district to facilitate public education of eligible pupils. Dr. DeBray was not elected by me or anyone else, and he works for you, not the other way around. It is your job to consider what is legally, morally, and ethically the best for the students in this district. The state treasurer has been making political noise, and because what he said is patently incorrect, inappropriate, and not applicable to this district, I don't want to waste too much time on it. I've assisted more than 200 school districts to issue more than 1,200 bond offerings under the Missouri Direct Deposit Program. This district has its own superior credit rating from Moody's and hasn't even used the state program in recent issues. The next bond issue, if successful, would not qualify, wouldn't be issued until at least July, and therefore the district is in no way impacted by anything the state treasurer has said lately. If you want additional information on this, I'm happy to provide it. I'm a licensed financial professional with SEC licenses 750, 52, 53, 63, and 66. As regards to the Attorney General, I've known him personally since 1994. His current priority is to fundraise as much as possible to obtain endorsements to be Eric Greitens. He doesn't care about our kids one iota. His children attend a private school with a mask mandate, and they go to school masked every day of the week. This district has started to bow to bullying tactics on every front. Whoever's yelling the loudest, threatening board members or your children is being rewarded. I would urge you to consider if you want to carry out your elected duties or resign and allow your positions to be filled by individuals who are not ready to bow to the bullies. But if you want to consider the possible consequences of letting a bullying AG whose cease and desist has been universally, including by our own legal counsel, declared as unlawful, unenforceable, and inaccurate, then know this. If your actions in leaving this district vulnerable to the spread of a dangerous virus, which is clearly under your responsibility under Missouri Statute 167.191, cause any health damage to me or to my children, or impair my children's ability to have a safe and appropriate educational environment under the Americans with Disability Act, I will litigate. I am not alone. And unlike the empty threats of the AG, I would have the full weight of federal law behind me. In addition, your failure to honor the requirements of the ADA would expose this district to threat of federal litigation, punitive measures, potential loss of federal funds, and other consequences that make Eric Schmidt's threats pale in comparison. I don't like making threats. I've spoken to you 5 months in a row and never even contemplated the language that I've just said, but I don't seem to have a choice. You are considering an action which is literally going to put my life at risk. I'm currently battling cancer, and I don't ask for your help, but I certainly need to know if my kids have been exposed. I'm not asking you to be Lease Summit. I'm asking that you follow the time-honored tradition of attorneys everywhere. Just don't take hasty action tonight. You tabled the Rainbow Club to think about it for 2 months. This is a much more critical decision. Please wait and have your attorney issue a letter that you are considering pending litigation before making any decision. Thank you.
All right, that's all I have for comments from the audience. I have the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve that along with the addendum that you have received tonight. Powers, second. Helms, all in favor say aye. Motion carries. Financial reports, Mr. Orr, if you'd like to share with us what you have.
Good evening, members of the board. I direct your attention to the November financial summary, which should pull together the financial statement, investment, revenue, expenditure, all the financial reports. For the month of November, fund balances totaled $21.9 million. Of that amount, $23.1 million was invested. I know that seems odd that we have $23.1 million invested. We only have $21.9 million in balances, but we have a large number of checks sitting in the drawer awaiting your approval tonight. So once you approve those, they will be released. And we get a very large deposit of our tax funds that just come in on the 16th. So that helps us cash flow wise. Monthly revenues for November totaled $9.6 million. Revenues for the year are up $5.3 million through November when compared to last year. Local revenues are up by $1.8 million. It's mainly driven by Prop C of $1.3 and student activities, as some of our programs have begun to resume a little bit more in student activities by $375,000. And other local is up by $700,000. That is due to an unexpected rebate from our insurance carrier. We had a really good claims year last year, and that's what that rebate was for. These increases were offset by some lower delinquent tax collections of $866,000. State revenues are up by $2.2 million, and this is a little bit deceiving because, as you recall, the governor had withheld funds and then released them. So, at this point in time last year, we had not received that money. So it's really not an increase in funding, so to speak. It's just a reinstatement of what we should have been getting all along. Federal revenues also up and running ahead by about additional $1.5 million for food service, as the federal government continues to fund all meals for all students. And so that's increased our revenue there. Medicaid funding is also up by $400,000. This is actually a new program that we have for some direct billing, so this is some additional revenue, which is nice. And then lastly, our non-current receipts are up by $362,000, and we've had some increases in the sales of our surplus property. Our device insurance fees fall into that, and some local bill backs. Monthly expenses for November totaled $19.7 million. Overall expenses through November are $1.9 million less than last year through November. This is entirely due to $2.8 million less in bond finance capital project spending that we start to wind down some of those projects. This was offset by some increases in supplies. We've spent about $1 million more, and this is driven by food, utilities, and fuel expenses as inflation continues to increase our prices. One surprise so far has been salaries and benefits. Those are almost identical to last year at this point in time, even with raises and staffing changes. And the main reason for that is we still have a fair number of unfilled vacant positions, as our employment rate, the unemployment rate in our area is still much lower than it is on the national average, so it's really hard for us to fill some of those positions. We're finding it very difficult. Henry's working overtime to make that happen right now. So overall, that's pretty much it. Everything is where I expect it to be, with the exception of our salaries and benefits running a little bit behind. I hope that we can fill those positions, but it's just not happening.
Any questions for Mr. Orr regarding the finance report? If you accept the summary, I need a motion to approve. Callahan? Second. George, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Orr. Old business. Mrs. Kester, your facilities update, please.
Yes, I had, do you want a facilities update or the elevator? I'm sorry. We talking about the elevator contract or?
Yeah, let's talk. Well, go ahead and you have an update separate from the elevator?
Pretty much all of our projects are wrapped up for the summer that we did, so there's really not much to update on the project, so.
Go ahead and bring us the elevator service contract.
I'm sorry. In the board packet that I had submitted to Dr. Bray, a memo for the elevator maintenance service agreement, we had put this out to bid last year. And in that contract, we had the option to negotiate an additional 5 years and bring it back to the board every year. I reached out to TK Elevator, who is a contractor who's been awarded the contract, and they would like to renew the contract for another year without any increase. So I would just like to ask the board's recommendation to renew their contract.
Any questions? If not, I need a motion to approve the contract as presented. Powers, second Callahan, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Dr. DeBrey, next item, coronavirus update.
Our coronavirus plan has been as part of the consent agenda the last 2 months. So originally this plan was developed and approved by the board on October 18th. And then you approved it every 30 days twice. This is the first time I've taken it out because it will be, if you accept my recommendation, it will be different as we go forward. I can tell you that the plan the board had in place on October 18th has worked pretty well. It was a mask option plan with some thresholds. If we reached, there was increased mitigation strategies. So since we implemented that plan, we've only had one classroom in the district that reached our 3 positive case rule that would have required additional mitigation strategies. And we've only had one school that reached the 2% threshold. Most of our schools have been 1% or less since October 18th, so that's been good. We did receive the cease and desist letter from Attorney General Eric Schmidt. You saw it, I've told you before that our attorney believes that since you're a local governmental body elected by the public, that the plan you put in place really is not subject to government oversight. So I can tell you with those low numbers though, I believe it's time to start reducing some of the mitigation strategies we've had in place. I think we need to do that. And therefore, I would recommend that when students return from winter break on January 6th, that masks be optional. Somebody wants to wear a mask, they can. And that only those positive COVID cases be excluded from school for 14 days or until cleared by a medical professional. In addition, I'd recommend that we would not be excluding close contacts. And those individuals would be allowed to come to school without a mask as long as they don't demonstrate symptoms. If they do have symptoms, they have to be excluded from school, just like any of our communicable disease policy we've dealt with in the past. They'd be excluded from school until they no longer have symptoms, then they'd be allowed to come back to school. We would not be doing the traditional contact tracing. Our principals would not be doing that and reporting numbers to the health department, but we would keep track of our positive COVID cases, and we would be notifying our parents when we have a positive COVID case in their school or their classroom. So pretty much back to before COVID and treating communicable diseases by our normal policy, which is EBD, and following our direction that we have from State Law 167.191, which says we need to keep communicable diseases from spreading in the schools. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Any discussion? Motion, discussion?
Discussion, please.
Yes, sir.
I would still want to have a threshold of 3 positive cases in the classroom. Can we maintain?
That's not part of this. That's not part of this plan, John, because we're talking, the recommendation is not to do the contact tracing.
But would it be up to us as a board to select some new number for classroom and or a percentage for school? Right now, we're talking about 3 positive cases in the classroom and 2% in the school. And that's only happened once in the last 90 days.
Right. And it's been less than 1% most, the rest of the time. So the issue is with this recommendation is that last year we had over 30,000 kids in the county that was quarantined and only 300 of those kids got sick. Right, so we keep sending kids home quarantining because we're contact tracing them, but they don't end up getting sick. So the plan, this recommendation is so that we can keep kids in school.
I'm gonna throw something in that you might, not to argue with you on that, but
Yeah, don't argue.
my only issue with stating that number is that I find that very invalid, just because we don't know how many kids actually went and got tested, right? So you can say they were sick, but a lot of parents, like I was sick, my husband was sick. We didn't take our kids to get tested. I 100% know that they had COVID, right? So you still have those people who didn't go and do that, who were sick and it didn't get reported with it. So I'm not disagreeing that a lot of kids were quarantined that didn't need to be, but also saying those numbers aren't exactly valid because it doesn't show the whole scope. Does that make sense? Because not everybody was tested.
It didn't test for sick either, you know what I'm saying?
Right, but they could have still had it and not showed symptoms and they could have spread it. I mean, that's what I'm saying is if we're really gonna look at the numbers and everybody would have needed to be tested, we have to have valid information with the tested, right? So we didn't. So that's why I hate when anybody puts it out there and they use those numbers because it's messed up. We don't have a lot of reliability with the numbers, right? Because it depends on what parent took this and what doctor did this and if this was reported and this wasn't. So I have an issue using those numbers just because it's so like this. But I just wanted to throw that because I don't disagree with you on a lot of the quarantines because there were a lot of kids at work. So that's something we need to look at. But my concern too, Dr. Bray, is how are we going to, so if we're not contact tracing and kids are getting, if somebody has it, how do parents know and how do we know what the spread is happening if nobody's contact tracing it?
Well, we'll still get reports back from parents if their kids are positive. We'll still know who is turning positive, and then we'll report that. You know, if there's a positive case in the classroom or in school, we'll still report that to the parents. We're just not gonna do where principals have to spend the majority of their time running around questioning, you know, who you've been in contact with. Was it less than 3 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, whatever. We spend an inordinate amount of time doing that, and we won't be reporting it to the health department because the health department doesn't have any authority anymore.
So what does that look like in your mind so you would get a letter home that there was a child on your child's bus that tested positive. There was a child in your class, there was a staff member. Is that the sort of thing that they're gonna get the email with it?
But I mean, I think the most important thing is that students that are exposed won't be excluded from school unless they have symptoms. If they have symptoms, they're gonna have to go home until the symptoms are cured.
Right. My only problem with that is that if you have it and then you don't show symptoms and you've been there giving it to people, right? So I guess my thought is why wouldn't we the first step be mask and monitor that we would go to? Do you know what I'm saying? Because it happens that you're around people. Obviously nobody's gonna go to school, I would hope, if they have it. But you've been exposed, you don't realize that you've been around these kids and you're coming to school and now there's nothing. So by the time we know that they have it, you could be 14 days in and 10 other kids could have it. And then there's it could be this ongoing.
I mean, it's still optional. I mean, parents can still have their children wear their masks. I mean, most districts are eliminating the mask mandate.
Right, I'm trying to walk through the processes of things, potential and why, of the steps we're taking. If that makes sense.
I hear you.
That's my biggest concern with it, is that, you know, obviously you don't know right away when you have something if it's spread, we have it, so, you know, and
Well,
then
the
at what
other
point.
issue now too is that every child has the ability to be vaccinated.
Right.
And they have the ability and the choice to be masked.
Right.
So, you know, that's where this is that, you know, we talked about that back in November too, that in January, we were gonna be looking at this so that.
Well, this
at
has
this
always been
point-
our hope,
Yeah,
and when we
absolutely.
set everything up, that we could get to a point. My concern is just, we don't know what it's gonna look like coming back in January. This is my honest biggest concern. We don't know what it's gonna look like coming back in January of kids being around it, and that there is currently another variant going on. And you know, it doesn't scare me, I feel like we don't have the full scope of what it's gonna be and how it's gonna look like in our schools. So making this big of a step is what concerns me to jump quickly into that in January. I wanna get to that, I absolutely wanna get to this and get things back to normal. And I don't want all the quarantines of our kids, I want them to be able to be back. But I think I would feel more comfortable if we didn't go so far.
I don't know that this is quite the step that you're thinking though, because what we've done is all these kids that have been in close contact that get quarantined. Do we know how many of those kids that have been quarantined have actually gotten sick?
That would be my next question.
Because
Does anybody keep the statistics on?
Because all I ever hear is my kid was quarantined 4 times this quarter and they never got sick.
But that requires you going to the doctor and
County
getting tested.
So guys, listen, I get, there's 2 very distinct sides in this room. I'd ask that you allow us to go through the conversation and debate this on both sides of it. Let's get to where our job is, Joe. So the county did keep it, right? The county's numbers, and the argument here is that not everybody gets a test. So the numbers could be different, right? The other side of that argument is that the tests sometimes aren't faulty or are faulty. I don't know those pieces. I know those are the 2 arguments I hear. Those numbers were like 1.3%, 1.2%. I might be a little bit off there. Kids that got quarantined that then were later sick, which amounted to something like 95,000 days of kids that weren't sick being kept out of school. And I think we've all talked about the fact that we don't want that for kids. But I have a little bit of a question, and I hope this doesn't derail where you guys are going, but Bernie, you call out the contagious disease policy or EBB. Can we get a little more detail about what's in EBB? Can we talk through that real quick? I want to just understand how this recommendation does or doesn't differ from that, and then compare that to where we're going versus how we've always looked at communicable diseases. Because our district has always had approaches for how we were going to handle things. I just want to understand a little bit better how this aligns to that.
Well, I can just say that EBB really refers as much to measles, rubella, chicken pox, the traditional childhood diseases. And I think we throw COVID right in there with that. And when we become aware that one of those diseases, you know, are in one of our schools, they're excluded from school, typically until they're cleared by the doctor. Whooping cough, strep throat, or others. Paul, can you think of any other part of that policy other than what I just said?
I think it speaks to a fair amount, like how the nurses, their input and their control and professional judgment about how it relates to making those decisions and informing parents. That's one of their critical care responsibilities. I'm doing that kind of one off memory. Laura has it here, but it's really just the standing language that's been in there about as a nurse assesses what is happening in an individual building, you tier up your response to your individual families on the basis of that. So it's fairly broad-based and empowers the nurse to make professional judgments is an easy way to kind of encapsulate it. I don't know if you say anything else to that.
No. But it's still a question of excluding those communicable diseases from the school.
Correct.
From the school.
Yeah.
And it's through that we arguably have the authority, or we go through the communication to parents, right?
Yep. Simple things
Come back to
like
the communication.
fever-free, you know, those conditions, what you look at. Those are some of the factors that you talk about in EBB.
I've heard some very valid concerns on the communication that I think we should talk through. But 4 or 5 years ago, we had an outbreak of the flu at one of our elementary schools. How did we address that?
So at the time, and I'm trying to think which one that would be specific to.
It was Twin Chimneys, I believe.
Yeah. That would be handled at an individual level. I'm not familiar with what's being referred to here. The health department is what would define an outbreak. So that's in conjunction with the health department. They inform us traditionally in that window of time that we would say this constitutes an outbreak, and then we would act on their guidance at that time. Same for lice or some of those other conditions.
The decision was made to shut down Twin Chimneys for a few days, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
I'm not aware of us ever shutting one of our schools down.
I must have that wrong.
I think somebody's misinformed you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It
that
was
would
shut
be,
down.
that
My
would
kids
be,
were home, so it was shut down.
so, whether happen or not,
Yeah.
that would be something that would have arisen from school nurse, seeing what's going on, the tracking, I'm assuming, of absentees. And then the district, I would imagine, combined with the board, coming together quickly and having that discussion and making a decision for the right way to handle the situation as it existed. We were able to do that, if it did happen, without planned mitigation and thresholds in place, correct? We didn't have that before.
Yeah, I'm speaking, not familiar with the scenario that's being described. Usually at that time, it would be something done in conjunction with the discussion with the health department. That was kind
It
of.
would be the health department telling us that it had to be shut down.
But I thought they don't have authority anymore.
That was,
Yeah, that's
what,
what.
5 years ago?
Yeah.
So now, in essence, they don't have authority, right?
They don't
I
have
just
the-
want to clarify.
They don't have the authority to quarantine.
Okay, but they would have the authority to shut a school down. Is that right?
I don't know. When Twin Chimneys scenario is several years ago, when they did have authority.
Okay.
This is new territory when they've came up with the court case that took away their power to quarantine.
And nothing in that policy states that it has to go to the board. It's basically on the level within the nurse and the admin
Administration
makes
in the
the
building,
decision.
the superintendent.
To my knowledge, yes. Yep.
So I would think based on attendance, Tom, you know, if you had 4 kids out, that might be able to be right.
Let me ask if I can then about the communication side. Some of the concerns that I've heard from people are things like I get an email that says there was a case at your school. Sometimes, you know, it was a case that your kid might have been in close contact. Many of our parents have multiple kids in the same school, certainly multiple kids in the same district. How can we, or can we, update our communication so that we're more specific into the event that occurred, the classroom that occurred, the child that it impacted, but not the child that was positive, the child impacted, so that parents who want to try to make a more informed decision have that ability to do so. I would like a communication that came out that said, you know, and I would like this for any communicable diseases. It was a positive case of X in your child.
Or in Johnny's.
Yeah, your child X's name, right, on this day. You know, I do think, I've always thought we should be as transparent with parents as we possibly can. I certainly think this falls into that.
I think, and maybe you're aware of this, but it has happened where, and I've heard this too, where Johnny and Julie are in the same school building, but not necessarily the same class, and they get a letter that your child has been in a close contact. Well, I don't know if Johnny in 3rd grade or Julie in 5th grade is the one that I'm worried about.
What happens to me?
So if we can fix that.
Or on the bus? Like, are they close to one of my kids or, you know? But when I get a letter, I don't know which kid they're talking about.
It's easy to be more specific.
So, I mean, I think for my part, right, I think policies should evolve over time. We learn new things, times change. I do believe we should incorporate the communicable disease policy, the EBV, into our COVID response. And if we need to go update that policy, we should open up that policy and update it. We shouldn't have a policy that stays stale while applying different kind of policies onto different variations of concern. So, I would like to make a motion.
We haven't all gotten to discuss. Where I'm at is, I think now is not the time to back off what we've been doing. If you remember a couple months ago, we did a survey and it was pretty much 50-50. So then we came up, it was one way one month, the other way the next month. And it didn't even last a month because everybody was up in arms. But you two got together, made a good policy that was a compromise. That's what we called it, and that's what it is. But now we're wanting to back off of that. I think now is not the time to do that because we're going into the season where things are gonna ramp up. And what is it? When we come back the 3rd for school? 6th. It wouldn't be but about a week and a half to our next meeting. I think we ought to probably roll with what we've got.
Well,
That's where I'm at.
if I may, and I appreciate your comment.
Absolutely.
When we did get together over a month and a half ago, it was before children in the 5 to 11 range could get their vaccinations.
Do we,
And
so
that-
speaking to that, do we have the figures on that? How many have we got vaccinated? in
All
our
that
school?
wanted to, I would think.
All that wanted to. What is the quantifiable number of that?
Well, the point is, again, Tommy, if, regardless if it's 30% or 90%, you can't force people at this
I
point to
understand
get
that,
a
but can you
vaccination.
answer the question of what quantifiable number? It's not a HIPAA protected, so you can ask that and assemble that data.
So I don't know what that number is, but what my point is that if it were 40% or 60%, whatever it is right now, that's not gonna change going forward because the vaccine has been available now to anyone that wants it. So we can't wait 3 months, a month, 6 months, thinking that number is gonna go up anymore, because I would think that at this point, those who wanted it have gotten it. If that makes sense?
Sure.
So I can't use that as an excuse to wait or to do something different. We've been told that that there needs to be opportunities for choice, and where we're at to, I've already made my point on that, so I apologize for staggering.
I think at this point, it's just, I think it's time to be rather safe and sorry. There's no reason for us to really change it. I think we're going into another unknown dynamic with this thing. I think to change anything at this moment, like today, right now, I think it would be a little bit, it would definitely, in my opinion, consider us jumping the gun. I think we need to maybe table this for another month, maybe 2, just to kind of see what numbers do and where we end up and how things going. If in a month or 2, numbers still stay low, then we can revisit it. And I think people will be, out of us 7, more of us will be more optimistic with the idea of switching to the plan that Dr. Gray presented.
Another point too that I'd like to make is that by making this decision, if we made that decision tonight, with the end of classes for this year being tomorrow, we would give everyone that is currently in quarantine, whether they're ill or not, it would wipe that slate clean, because they're gonna be out of school for a week and a half, 2 weeks. And that when we come back, it just is a good breaking point and a good place to start fresh.
Why wouldn't it be wiped clean? Without us.
Well, I mean, it's just, as far as starting it now, if we continue to say, I gotta think through my words because I don't wanna get put in social media again. At this point, by saying, I think that there's plenty of research and papers that people have come up with now as far as the science. We talk to physicians, they help guide us through our previous policies prior to the vaccination. There are reports and studies that are done talking about the efficacy of masks. We are seeing some breakthrough on the vaccinations, but they're saying the Omicron is, maybe even though it may spread a little faster, it's 30 times less potent than what we've been seeing. So, I mean, we can continue to operate in fear and never allow our kids to get back to the classroom, or we can make a decision that allows our kids to be educated. That's my
Out of fear. I know I'm not. I think I'm doing things based on the information from actual scientists and doctors that I try and follow and their decisions for all of our students. I've said from the beginning, I want us to be able to get back as soon as possible to where we need to be for our kids and be back to a normal setting, but we need to do it the right way. We need to do it smartly, because if we don't, it's gonna be a hot mess. And then we're gonna have lots of sick kids that are gonna be out and lots of staff that are out. So I haven't talked to anybody up here that's afraid of anything. But I think all of us just wanna make sure that we're doing things in the right way to make sure that everybody's protected the way they need to be, so that we can have longevity and get back to what was normal.
Bernie Sillinger said that she doesn't believe there's merit to the AG's.
Doesn't it?
Right.
Okay.
Correct? That was her recommendation.
I'm sorry?
Sillinger's recommendation regarding the AG's letter.
Yeah, she said that she believes since the board is a locally elected governmental body, that they have the authority to set the rules for the district. However, she felt like you could get into litigation with the Attorney General and it could be expensive, and therefore she said, you can always go back to some mitigation strategies, but if you accept the Attorney General's direction, at least you can avoid some litigation maybe down the road.
I assume the state of Missouri has deeper pockets than we do too. Question two, right? Is how much do you spend fighting that? Now listen, this sounds colder. I can appreciate that. But there's operational questions that we're gonna have to answer here too. Right? We're gonna have to get into questions around not even what are we doing with the kids that are being limited through their sports, their extracurriculars, and all those things in the winter, which we've been dealing with already, arguably. We end tonight the additional COVID payments for teachers that have to leave because of quarantines for their kids. That's gonna have to be revisited, at least discussed, if we continue with the quarantine measures. There is gonna be litigation, and maybe that's okay. That is gonna have a cost. It's gonna come out of our operating funds. These are all business decisions that we're gonna have to make, and we should make in conjunction with this discussion. We shouldn't go back on this recommendation without having that very, very deep discussion, because it's gonna have major impacts on our staff immediately.
Is there a reason that we can't move forward with the way we have it, but get rid of the quarantines and have it mask and monitor when we come back in January?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, is
No.
there a reason?
No.
Doesn't change the litigation side.
That gets rid of quarantines.
They're gonna get rid of the mandate.
I just really have an issue with that, I'm sorry. I don't want us to get in litigation, I don't, but I really, really have an issue with somebody who was not elected for the school board and this community to be making decisions and threatening. I just really, it bothers me inside to my core, I'm sorry, it just does.
I'm frankly tired of being called out by both sides of this. I'm tired of having people come up here and say, how dare you bow to bullying? I'll bully you so that you go my side. And I've seen that on both sides of this. I'm not a fan of what we talked about with a letter or withhold the bonds or anything. Okay, what we're talking about right now is what we've discussed getting to long before those letters were sent out. Right?
Right, and so that's why I feel like, why can't we do what our plan was and what we all feel is best to do, what we feel is best for our district? And I do agree with the quarantine stuff. I think we have a way that we can move forward with that and do the mask and monitor and look at January and say, let's how our numbers been when we came back from Christmas break. How is everybody doing? Everything looks great. You report that. Okay, let's move to this next step. Like, to me, let's step it off. Let's take things this way instead of just going like this, like that. I feel like that's the more responsible thing to do without having all the information, because there's no way we could have all the information when we get back from break. But I don't want any more kids out from quarantine that don't need to be, so when they come back, so teachers wouldn't have to do that. I mean, that takes care of those issues.
There are several kids that I know, though, if we're gonna be talking about mask and monitoring, that can't wear masks. And they're still in that situation where it's causing them problems. So I don't wanna see them quarantined because they can't wear a mask.
I think there's ways that we can work with that personally, that the schools have the ability to do that. And every child has their own situation and their needs that we work with every day that I think we need to do.
Well, the Bernie's recommendation, again, keeps us from getting to a point where we are looking at another micro pandemic in the district, because we can still do whatever mitigation we need to, if it's gonna become a problem, the absences. That the kids are not gonna have to be masked, and they're not gonna have to be quarantined. And take the Schmidt thing out of the equation.
Right, but at what point? Well, we don't know. There's nothing set in place at what point.
Well, at that point, what we do is we put the responsibility on the people that we've hired, the DeGraves and the Myers and the principals of the buildings, to make the decision to run the school district the way we want them to.
Eric, I'd love to hammer out a more robust UBB policy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said I'd love to hammer out a more robust UBB policy, something that isn't decades old.
Well, why don't we focus on that and the policy way we focus on the UBB for the moment, getting that squared away, and then the mask.
That seems like a reasonable compromise to me. Focus on the policy, EBB, people we've got now.
But keeping what we've got now gives us liability, guys.
If I'm shaving into a bullet, it's not.
I guess it's all about how you, I guess it's all how you look at that. To me, that's just another example of somebody trying to, I guess, the term being used is bully. So, I think that's not, I'm not receptive to that. So I guess for me, that's a non-issue.
Well, for me, when the bully in the neighborhood comes up and starts throwing rocks, I personally would rather not get into a fist fight.
I've been involved in cease and desist before with patent infringements and some things like that in my professional career. It's basically, it's the warning shot, right? In those instances before litigation, right? So it can be a threat sometimes, depends on how deep the pockets are. You know, was weighing that out with, well, yeah, they sent me this. Is it something we want to fight? That's really the question you have to ask yourself here. Is how serious is he? Is it just a warning? Or is it just the step he's taking before litigation? So.
And maybe he doesn't have the authority to actually take it very far, but he also has the money and the state and his power from his office to take us to court.
Yeah. And our attorney basically
said I wouldn't
fight. I wouldn't press him on it. Because she is also very conservative and cautious from that standpoint of keeping us out of trouble.
I guess my question is, when does it stop? When does the oversight of this crap stop? That they do that? Because what's next? What if he says what fits into his political agenda? The next thing is, hey, this is what you guys should do, and I want this gone of all of these schools. And they come after us. Are we gonna sit here again and say, well, he might litigate us? I mean, we were elected to do what we think is best for this district and who we represent. And I don't want to hear from that. And this is what bothers me, is that it's against my moral compass, is because I don't do well to bullies.
Well,
So,
and I'm sorry if I walked on you.
you're fine.
Just keep in mind that Schmidt's letter isn't just coming out of his personal political canon. He's trying to make a political position. He's definitely doing that, but he's doing that based on a judge's decision on a court case that was brought forward.
It doesn't apply to us.
But it does apply to us in that the decision was more about the health departments and their reach, right? It's not necessarily school boards, but the Missouri statute for school districts, it does not allow us to quarantine, right? So that's where he's coming from in that respect.
And I'm fine with saying that when we come back, that we do the mask and monitor in January, and we keep up with our other things. But that ruling does not apply to our school district. We are an elected board, and he's misinterpreting that for his own political gain, and that is wrong.
But when you say mask and monitor,
It's
you're
gonna be for
also,
a court to decide.
yeah.
Ultimately, that's where this will go at some point.
Well, I mean, if you just read the ruling, it's for unelected positions making that. So he's referring to things that happened like St. Louis County when they said everybody's masked, and that was an elected position, right? So we were elected, and everything we did, that's why we have not broken any laws, we haven't done anything wrong, that it really does not apply to us. But he's using that as a guise, and it's wrong. It's just wrong.
That it's gonna go to the courts and it's gonna be decided. I just don't wanna pay for it.
I don't wanna pay
That's
for it
what- that's-
either, but
that's
I
what-
hope somebody stands up to him. It's not right.
But by doing the mask, and I'm just calling into question again, the efficacy of mask. If we do a mask and monitor, there's a lot of people that don't believe that masks are even effective. So by telling people to put masks on, because, I mean, what does that do? It might make some people feel good about it, but then there's those that don't. That don't.
It's not, to me, a debatable thing when you have medical professionals over and over again stating that it does.
But even your
In the
medical
essence, and
professionals-
break it down.
Your medical professionals don't even agree. Who you listen to. So I don't wanna debate that. I think that we need to make a decision based on what we have here. What's best for Fort Zumwalt. Any other discussion?
We could put it up to vote and have an update and vote on it, but I don't know that leaves us in a good spot as a board. I'm trying to figure out if there's a compromise there. I mean, for me, mask and monitor isn't it. I mean, I am in full support of this. I am in full support of moving this back to the DBB. I think we're there. I think I've heard month over month from people saying, every time we talk about change, people saying, just keep it the way it was. Because this new change that you're contemplating is what's gonna put us over the edge. I've heard that every time. We heard it again tonight. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But the continuation of what we're doing isn't working for our kids. I don't know what we gain out of a mask and monitor. I really don't. If there is a compromise there, I'd love to find it.
It's keeping them from quarantining. And it's also putting another step of mitigation between people in front of them if they have it. If you're exposed and you're in school, you're in school. But if you're not showing symptoms and you have that on, that's giving another layer of protection to people. So better than them being at home quarantined away from school.
And it seems like the Schmidt deal is more of an issue, so you still have to deal with that. Well, and that's the part of it. So if we're gonna mask and monitor, we might as well keep it the way it is as well, because we're still gonna have to deal with Eric Schmidt no matter what, if that's the case. So I think he has other districts he's probably going to, I'm gonna say go after, but other districts he'll deal with, he'll approach prior to getting to us. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to just sit back and watch
But he didn't waste any time getting us a cease and desist letter, Mr. Helms. I mean, he came right after us.
That takes 10 minutes to draft, and cut and paste.
Well, it won't take long for him to put our name on a lawsuit either.
So Eric, is your piece here, the mask and monitor, and that's it, that's the only piece that you would add to this?
That we would come back in January, using this, doing what we're doing right now, that masks are optional, that, you know, we've still got those levels of mitigation if schools reach those levels, but we do the mask and monitor so that we don't have the quarantines.
How are you gonna monitor, or how are you gonna mask if you're not contact tracing? How are you gonna know who needs to wear masks? If you have a sick kid in the classroom, then the whole classroom has to wear a mask?
If you were exposed, what's the difference? We just said that we're gonna let people know that they were exposed and do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking. I'm not arguing with you. I'm asking. If there's someone in the classroom and we get a letter that says your child has been exposed because there's a positive case in the classroom, do they wear masks? Because they have, the whole classroom has to wear masks because there was a COVID
I think we need
positive?
to continue with the way that we're doing it right now through January, that they're tracking of who they're around and what we're doing. Through January, we mask monitor, and January meeting, we look at the numbers, we look at all the information and decide if we need to roll back and where we're at and establish, if we get to this, we're rolling this back, we're taking this off and we're gonna move to this. In that time, rework that policy, and all of us put in our input and update the policy, have that ready to go, so January, we can be ready to move.
Lesson learned out of Winslow. I think they're the only district in the county that did a mask and monitor. Right? What I heard from staff there, and others frankly, but it was the difficulty that applied to our staff. The fact that it's one thing to say, okay, you have you have a static classroom at an elementary level, right? But as kids start moving around, how do you make sure that a kid is known by every teacher that they and not, their neighbors should be wearing a mask? How do you track that? How do you monitor that? How do you govern over the top of that and apply that additional burden onto our staff to make sure that it can happen? Feedback I got was that it was not effective. So I don't know, I mean, torch later for this, but the fact is, if you were gonna go with a mitigation piece, I think you're better off on something more close to what we have now. Then you would be saying, let's try to operationalize a mask and monitor policy that has some very significant governance issues associated with it.
Those are good points. I'm trying to think of some way, like you said, of a compromise with it. I personally feel that it's too much to move with the unknowns, move it in January. I 100% want to get to that point. I think we need to look at this policy and be ready to go. I think there's too much that we haven't addressed. Moving that, we go from all this to basically nothing.
Is there a percentage that's give a little bit of breathing room for what we have today that you'd be okay with?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Is there a percentage that would give a little additional breathing room from where we are today that you would be okay with?
What do you mean, to get rid of everything?
No, for like the mitigations, the mask mitigation or something like that. Is there a building percentage that you would be okay with? In my opinion, my preference would give us a little bit of additional buffer than what we have today. You would be okay with? Like,
Would that 2% figure be acceptable? That's what it's.
We already have that written in.
Well, it's not in this. If we're trying to find a policy to this, what I'm asking is, would some percentage like that 2%? I don't.
We've only touched it once.
What's that?
We've only touched it once.
I mean, my issue with this policy is, comparing COVID to lice is just ridiculous. Lice did not kill 700,000 Americans. Like, we have to look at it through a different scope. Like, is it gonna be here for a long time? It appears that way. Do we have to live with it? Absolutely. So that means that we need to look at how we're gonna live with it in the right manner, right? So that policy that we have is things that we haven't even it was built before we even could think of COVID, right? So, like, we need to look at it. It may look differently than how we would deal with strep or how we deal with lice.
It's unfair to also say that it's only COVID and the alignment with lice, right? I think bubonic plague is also.
But it falls in that category of, that was brought up, strep, lice, like,
So does
that hasn't killed 700,000 people this year. So,
Well,
I mean,
now
that's-
there's this year, 700,000 this year, like,
in the
the last 2 years.
since we've had COVID, it's
Prior
not many people.
to vaccinations, what's it been since the vaccinations come out? There have been I'm just saying.
All that in is not beneficial. It's not, you can't compare things when they're completely different. Not to say that we shouldn't have a policy and there's a way that we can't deal with it. We can and we have to. We're gonna have to move forward and deal with it. But to say we're gonna handle strep the same way we handle COVID is just not smart, in my opinion.
Well, we're both communicable diseases though, and that's what that policy's for.
Right, but that's what I mean. When that was written, there wasn't COVID. We didn't even imagine that.
No, there was human coronavirus, which was it was the cold.
Right, but it didn't do what this has done.
Well, but that's what it's coming to. That's what they're saying, the Omicron
That's what we
variant is
hope that it
gonna be.
does, absolutely. We hope that it gets to that. But if it doesn't, and it goes back up, we have to have a plan in place. My point.
Eric, if you amended this to include a percentage threshold for the mask, not the mask and monitor, but the masking, I come along with you.
Walk me through that one.
So if we amended this, the motion amended this to add in the percentage for mask as a mitigation threshold.
So saying that we would go back to the stuff if we got to a certain point.
Did you go back to, I mean, I guess what's being asked for there is the mask mitigation if it got to a certain percentage within a school.
Like we have it now.
What, are you saying like the same thing we got right now?
Minus the quarantines, minus the contact tracing and the quarantines,
Like what we have it now.
minus the contact tracing and the quarantines.
So how would you know if you're not contact tracing?
There's a difference between contact tracing and counting positive cases. In fact, those two don't align at all. A positive case, a positive case. Like, you don't have to go through and contact trace and say, and you can still communicate out, just like we've already talked about. What you're not doing is sending over to the county, because they don't want it, the list of people who are within 6 feet, 15 minutes. You're not taking our nurses and our administrators and turning their job into nothing more than chasing around cases with a ruler. Right? You're removing those pieces. And you're saying that when we get a positive case, a certain percentage, we use a mask as a mitigation. That's what I'm hearing as a fundamental ask. And we go with that. And we, at that point, then say we're not going to quarantine kids who aren't sick. I do think, though, the mask and monitor adds on a significant number of operational hurdles that would be both unrealistic to see sustained and unfair to our staff to be demanded.
So how did the families know?
We would send an email out.
So those same emails would be distributed to the family?
Based on posture.
And then the families would determine if they want to send their kids to school or not.
And again, how would we know positive cases?
Yeah, are we still gonna have the track?
The same way we're letting it out now.
Yeah, that's reported to us, by the parents.
So everything would be the same of what we have now. We'd just be getting rid of quarantines. Is what you're telling me.
Well, you've got, if you follow this plan and put a percentage in there, there won't be any quarantines on a close contact until or unless they develop symptoms. If they develop symptoms, then they go home until they're cleared by, or until they don't have any symptoms
Right,
anymore.
but we'd be getting rid of the part that says now that if you're exposed at all, you're quarantined. If you have close exposure, you're quarantined.
Correct.
That's the part we would be removing.
Right. Yep. And we wouldn't be wearing masks. They wouldn't come back unless they wanted to. They wouldn't come back and have to wear a mask. They would be able to come back unless they had symptoms.
And the school nurse has the ability that if they have symptoms, to say that they have to be at home.
They do.
Absolutely.
They do.
If they're sick, they're out.
They don't have to test positive.
If they have symptoms, they have to go home and they may go and get a test right away to just, prove that they're negative. I mean, those are things that we will work out,
I just want to make sure that the schools have enough to be able to say that, because I've seen parents and kids that are sick. And the nurse keeps going, they're sick, so take them home. They're sick, send them home. And I mean, the nurse is like, I think that they have it, the parent's not testing them, right? So they need to have that they can say, no, this, you know what I mean? Like that's frustrating.
So they bring back a negative test.
No, I mean, talk through this. It's pretty clear until the symptoms are gone or they are cleared by a medical professional.
Right.
Just like they are in any other time in our history. They're sick, we send them home until they're not sick.
Right, but what's happening is they'll send them home and they're back at school the next day.
Then they get sent home again. Right,
Right, but they've been around.
What policy can we put in place right now that's gonna force a parent to follow the request? Like, at a point, you put a policy in place, which we are, right? And we operate against it. Kid is sick, they go home. If the parent brings the kid back, they go home. What else would you do?
So what about just the policy we have now, amending that to what we've done, or everything else in place?
That's what we need to do.
All of the above.
That's what we would need to do.
That's what I'd be in favor of that.
And then.
Well, it would be the same thing as what Dr. Brewer's already requesting, or what do you call that? Recommending, except that you would have a threshold to then reinstitute. What you're asking is to keep the mitigation in place. What he's recommending is we take the mitigation out unless you get to that threshold, and then it comes back.
Saying the same thing.
Yeah. Well, you are, but you're not. But you say whatever you want to say and make it make sense, but.
I think his right now is not what we want to do, his recommendation. I think what we're saying is we keep everything how we have it except remove the quarantines. We readdress it in January, and in that time too, we need to look at the policy that we have here. That's what I'm understanding. Is that?
Can you just throw the language out, potential motion, to see if we're.
Yeah, please do.
And I think what the motion would end up being is that we continue forward with today's policy of mask-related mitigations at the building level based off of the percentages defined, and remove all aspects of contact tracing and quarantining of potentially exposed children.
Problem is with that, and I'm sorry, because that is your motion.
Well, it's not my motion, we're throwing out language for the motion, we're trying to make sure we get it right.
The only, if you do that, then you need to add at some point, we need to readdress or include policy EBB because of that's the connotation of the communicable disease, and it gives the nurses the opportunity and the meat to do what they need to do to send kids home. Right now, we don't have that because they're not supposed to be sending kids home. It was all based on what the health department was doing, right?
we're still sending kids home.
Yes.
That's
We have a right to do that as a district under that, because that policy is already in place.
It's not the health department that's quarantining, it's us excluding them from school based on a close contact.
Right, which we have the right to do.
Which we do. Yeah, we have to be able to do that.
Right.
I'm just saying that the health department is not quarantining anymore, we are excluding.
No, I understand that, but I'm just trying to clean it up, that's all.
Can we ask Tammy to read back what we wrote there?
You wanted to make a motion to continue with the current policy as is, but remove all aspects of contact tracing and quarantining of exposed children.
Potentially.
Potentially.
So what does that leave us with?
What do you
We're
mean?
still gonna have
Class, the school, right? Is that what you're asking?
yeah, that's what I'm saying, we're still gonna have on the website where you can, everybody can see that, correct? That's still gonna be.
No, because we're not
I
doing,
don't know that
we're
you're
not,
really.
you're not gonna need that.
Yeah,
You're
because
not
you're
gonna-
not contact tracing, so it would be,
You don't need the dashboard.
but at any, it's in there, at any exposure.
But we're not contact tracing. You can't put numbers up that you're not counting.
No, I'm talking about positive cases. I know contact tracing, but I'm talking about positive cases. I know, let's say 20, X amount of positive. That's what I'm not, I know we're not contact tracing, just for the knowledge of the parents, and, I think they appreciate that.
And add this, the student population by building. So it's an easy percentage for the parents to look at.
Okay, so one more time on the motion. Please, can you read it?
You want me to read it again? To continue with current policy and remove all aspects of contact tracing and quarantining of potentially exposed children.
So we keep the percentages in of an individual class and of a building. And really the only change has been we're not excluding kids due to a close contact. Unless and until they have symptoms.
Should I add potentially exposed children unless they develop symptoms?
The adult symptoms are sick and they go home. It needs to be added to it.
Did you say Tom? I'm sorry.
So children with symptoms are effectively sick. I don't think you add that into it.
Do we add into this motion that we will revamp EBB for next month?
Do we need to have that as a motion?
I don't know, I'm just asking. Or we can.
I mean, I think that's.
Directive.
We don't need that?
I give us direction.
Yeah, we can look at it.
All right. Okay, so there is a motion, I need a second.
Somebody needs to make the motion. It's not my motion.
Oh,
Okay, made the motion?
he did not.
I just hope
That
the word-
just with the
you guys
word.
can make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, second? Elms? Roll call?
Craig?
No.
Gabriel?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Mike?
No.
John?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes, even though I would do
All right. Motion carries. Anything else on that? Special Education Committee report. Dr. Smith?
Laura.
Here.
First of all, thank you, Board President. Wanted to thank Dr. St. Pierre and Jamie and the FCEA. I think we had a really great group of folks come together. The committee met on November 4th and the 11th. You have a detailed report of the outcome of those two sessions. I'll highlight a couple of the outcomes. It was a very collaborative process. We did spend a bit of time focusing first on what's going well. And it was really good to hear from our staff what they feel is going well in the realm of special education. A couple highlights of that. It was mentioned by our teachers that they feel they have manageable caseloads, that there's effective collaboration in place, that they have support from the district and the administration within their buildings. So those are just a couple highlights of the positives, but really important ones. Some areas that we identified for growth through the collaborative process are some room for improvement in the implementation of new forms and processes, increased consistency across levels and buildings. We're going to bring a group together to look at processes over the summer to streamline some of our paperwork and practices, and request that we would raise administrator awareness when we're looking at scheduling and priorities, and making certain that we're intentionally scheduling classes and students into those classes where special education is concerned. A couple of things that we did discuss but were outside the scope of the committee was discussion about improved elementary scheduling and additional work days and plan time or days. And we did come to consensus that that was outside the scope of that committee. So there isn't any action required from the board this evening. We just wanted to let you know where that group arrived and felt like it was a great process. Are there any questions?
No questions? Thank you very much. Dr. Sinclair, you got an extracurricular task force recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. Good evening, members of the board. You have in your packet a memo from me outlining some recommendations from the task force recommendations for adding a middle school GSA that was tabled in the November meeting, pending sending that to a committee for further discussion and study. And we formulated that, had a couple of committee meetings on December 1st, had some good discussion there. And then again, had a follow-up meeting virtually on December 8th, and Mr. Emmons, Mr. Helms, and Ms. Powers were participating in those discussions in some form or another, so appreciate your input on that. I included in that memo the original language that was brought forth to the board, and then in bold below the revised proposal that was that came out of the discussions that we had in these two meetings, and so present these for the board's consideration.
Any questions? Any comments? Motion to approve the recommendation?
I'll move for approval as presented.
Second by Helms. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. New business, Dr. Rivera.
First item under new business is a recommendation from Dr. St. Pierre on the new minimum wage amount that the federal government has stated.
Thank you, Dr. Bray. Yes, in January 1st of 2022, the state of Missouri is increasing minimum wage to $11.15 an hour. This technically does not apply to us as public school entity. However, we would like to recommend that we are in line with the minimum wage expectations for all of our employees, as it will, continue to help us and probably would hinder us if we are not when we're attempting to recruit and retain employees. And so there are a couple of employee categories that would be affected, that we would recommend we implement some increases across the board, across all employee categories to get us in line with those minimum wage expectations. The reason why we can't just increase our entry-level wage is that will, in essence, put entry-level or newer employees above earning a higher rate than some in the same category who have been here for a number of years. And so we felt the fairest thing to do was to try to implement some across-the-board raises effective January 1st for our student nutrition services. That would be cooks. Our current entry-level wage for cooks is $11.10 an hour, and cook helpers, our current entry-level wage is $10.55 an hour, and our high school parking lot attendants, whose current entry-level wage is $11.10, would recommend that our student nutrition employees have a 60-cent an hour hourly increase, and that would get entry level to the January 1 minimum wage, and parking lot attendants a 15-cent hourly increase, which would get entry level wage to in line with that January 1 minimum wage threshold of $11.15. Also note that with the state's plan that this was a 4-year kind of scale up for minimum wage, that the final increase as it is right now is planned for January 1 of 2023 to go up to $12 an hour. Right now, we're just looking at this January 1, 2022 increase. Put together an estimate of what that fiscal impact would be for the rest of the year if we did implement that recommendation. Would cost approximately $51,000 in payroll, additional payroll expenses. So our recommendation is to implement those hourly increases as stipulated in the memo.
Do we need to take action on each individual, or is one combined
Just
recommendation?
just moving up to the minimum wage.
Need a motion to accept the recommendation on minimum wage? Bauer, second. George, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Very good. Next item, Jeff Orr has the 21-22 budget revision. The board adopts a budget by July 1st, and then they modify it in December and May to bring receipts and expenditures in line, so it's not, doesn't get so far out. So Jeff's got the recommendation for December.
Members of the board, you have a hard copy there on the dais, this document here. You guys have had the electronic version, it's the exact same thing over the weekend, and have had a chance to review that. I'll just briefly go through, there are 5 required parts by law for a budget. That's the budget message, which is the kind of narrative format. It's the very first page in here, and that kind of describes everything that's happened and occurred since the original budget was drafted and changes through this December revision. There's also the fund balance area, revenues, expenses, and then outstanding debt. Kind of to paraphrase and summarize this, revenue went down by $4.4 million in total compared to the original budget. This was mainly due to the Blankenship court case, which forced the district to roll back 12 cents. Cost us about $3.5 million. That was offset by some increases in Prop C and miscellaneous local revenue that adjusted the budget since the original. We also reduced federal revenue by $1.4 million, and that was directly related to ESSER 3 funding, which was earmarked for expenses that are planned to occur in future years, future fiscal years. So we had set aside some money for, I think, some high-dose tutoring and some HVAC filters, and there's some other things, some software that we've purchased that we'll continue to purchase that in future years as long as the grant is there and we can use those funds for that. Expenses also went down by $2.8 million. $1.5 million was related to salary and benefits because of those unfilled vacancies, which we kind of talked about in this last financial update. And another 1.5 was related to expenses categorized as supply type items. Again, this was related to the ESSER 3 and those things that we won't be spending those funds on until future fiscal periods. So both revenues and expenses were backed out. There was also a reduction in capital projects of $400,000, and that was just an alignment of available bond funds that we had at the end of last year. As you may recall, when we do the original budget, the prior year is not finished yet, so we have to roll over whatever available funding there's an adjustment there, so that's what that is. So in summary, operating surplus went down from $7 million to $4 million. Operating balances are projected to be $33.7 million or 15.1%. But again, I have to caution you guys that surplus is only because of stimulus funding, and we would probably be closer to a $5.5 million deficit without the ESSER 3 one-time stimulus money. So, which the state, by the way, is still not appropriated yet, and they have till I think March 24th to do so, or we will lose that money, which I sure cross my fingers that they appropriate it. I don't know, does anybody have any questions about anything in the budget or?
So the one-time money is about $9.5 million?
It's a little over 10, but we back some of that out because we're going to push it forward. So I would say this budget includes probably about $8.5 million of ESSER 3. No, there is 9.3 in here that I have left in for ESSER 3. So yeah.
We've seen a 5% increase in operating fund balances in the last 18 months or so because of these funds. But it sounds like we're still on track that once the funds are gone, presumably next year, then we're back to sliding. Is that true, or
we're back to
our fund balancing sliding back down?
Oh, most definitely. We would be in a deficit spending position. There's really no new revenue streams other than just normal growth in our tax base, and it will not make it this shortfall.
So while it's good that we're 15.1% now, we shouldn't be excited about what that means for the future.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, any motion to approve the budget modification for 2021-22 budget? Powers, second. Callahan, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next time.
Thank you. Next item is the bus lease recommendation for next year. We have, last year we skipped replacing any buses, and we need to get back on track. So Jeff has the number of buses and a recommendation on the lease.
Members of the board, I have a memo in your packet that discusses the transportation lease. We lease all of our buses through Central States. The transportation department, as Dr. DeBray said, we skipped last year to try and save a few dollars, and they kind of got behind. We typically try and replace around 15, keeps us on pretty good footing as far as our fleet goes. So this year I met with them, and they said they really need 18 buses. Just there are some buses that need to be turned in and replaced. So the mix of those buses is down below, and the pricing along the bottom. Central States, they give us a really good deal on a lot of these buses. So we can turn these buses in pretty much whenever we want to at this point. So we were doing lease purchase on some to save money because it helps keep the interest cost down. At Central States, if we lease those directly from them, in some of these cases, they pay a higher interest cost than the district does directly because it's municipal lease. It's kind of tax exempt. So that's why we've asked to structure some of these buses in this way. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the leases. This also includes, we would have 154 buses, which we would renew for one more year. We have to renew those buses that are on currently.
Any questions for Mr. Orr regarding the bus lease recommendation? Not any motion to approve? Powers, second. Helms, all in favor say aye. Motion carries. Next item.
All right, the next item is an amendment to the Zumcare services agreement. If you look on your tab, or if you look on your computers for Zumcare services agreement, we have the facility for Zumcare over at Great Rivers Church. Or Grace Rivers Church, I guess it is. They have half of the building, and the other half is controlled by BJC. They provide us our space for Zumcare. Zumcare is, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say it's been really wildly successful for our staff. We have a doctor over there now, and we have a nurse practitioner, a family nurse practitioner. We regularly evaluate the services and just get good comments all the time. Our staff can go over there at no charge. They can get some medications at no charge. They can get x-rays at no charge. They get blood work at no charge. So it's really a nice benefit for the staff, and I'm pleased that we're able to offer it. We have the opportunity to extend the service agreement for another 5 years. Right now, our service agreement takes it through 2023. If you look at that amendment to the service agreement down there about 2/3 of the way down the page, it talks about year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10, year 11. So that would begin on 2024. The first 3 years, year 7 through 9, are a 1% increase on those per member per month. That PM, that's per member per month. So that's what we have to pay for everybody that's covered at Zumcare. So they would like to increase that for the first 3 years at 1% a year, and then year 10 and 11 at 2%. And then year 11 would be 2028. So it's a good deal for us. It's much better than some of the other clinics that have been established in our area. Much better, like half those per member per month charges. So I'd recommend to you that you would accept this amendment to the service agreement, and we'll add years to Zoom Care.
Any questions for Dr. DeBray regarding the recommendation? If not, need a motion to approve the amendment as provided. Moore. Second. Powers, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Okay, I did better than the last time. So let me see what I can do with this. The next item is to recommend to you a no tax increase bond issue for April 5th, 2022. Last year, we, in April, along with our board member election, we had a tax rate increase. By putting the tax rate increase on there, we didn't want to confuse the public, so we did not put our bond issue that was scheduled for April 2021. So now we've gone another year without having some funds for capital improvement type activities. I'm talking about repairs, renovations, and any large projects that we have. So we would like to come back on April 5th, 2022 and present a bond issue in the amount of $125 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but this is a great time for bonds. The interest rates are very low. We can get enough money that we can make a real impact on things like roof repairs, on things like HVAC replacements, things that we really need that are sizable. We also have some other projects. So of the $125 million, about half of it goes to repairs and renovations. Like $20 million is going to be set aside just for HVAC. Lisa, usually when we're doing a bond issue, typically in the $30 million range, we probably spend maybe $10 million, maybe, on HVAC. We're just not taking as big a bite out of it as we should to keep everything in working order for our staff and our students. So we want to make a bigger impact. So about half of that, $125 million, for repairs and renovations. The other half would go towards major projects. And there, we're talking about a building addition over at North Middle School. We're landlocked over there. We are growing for North Middle School. So my thought is we tear down the 2-story wing and put up a 3-story wing, a bigger wing, and give them some capacity. We have some building additions that need to take place at North High School that we weren't able to fit in the last bond issue. Expansion on the cafeteria, a new multi-purpose room for them out there, and renovations to the building. Floor tile, door frames in many cases, a lot of painting, ceilings, things like that. We need to be looking at a new transportation center. We have a transportation center right now that you can only get 2 and 3 buses available for maintenance. We need something bigger, like Wentzville, where they have 8 bays that you can get buses into. And if you go out and visit the transportation center, and I encourage you to do that, you can see it's not a very good place for our bus drivers and our staff to have to spend their day. We're talking about 15 storm shelters for our elementary schools that currently don't have them. We have 1 storm shelter at Flint Hill. We have the Early Childhood Center, and we have Clemens Center. They all have storm shelter rated facilities. We need to add those to those elementary schools that don't have them. And they're shelters that can withstand EF4 tornado. They also have self-contained restrooms, self-contained electricity systems, and water systems. So, I don't know that anybody would be left in there very long, but at the same time, remember what happened in Joplin, remember what happened 2 weeks ago on Saturday night. Some horrible things took place, and if that would happen during a school day, it'd be awful nice to have those storm shelters that the whole building capacity can fit into. So we also want to talk about enhancements to fine arts. enhancements to the athletic fields, enhancements to technology. Fine arts, we really need to spend some money on equipment in orchestra and band. We haven't spent a lot of money in those areas in quite a while, so we want to spend quite a bit there. The athletic fields are going to be 3 new football fields, football soccer fields, 2 tracks and bleachers, and all the gyms with wooden bleachers. So that's just some of the things that might happen. The most noteworthy might be the swimming pool. We've tried that twice before. We're going to try it again. Thing about the swimming pool is what's changed now is that we're spending about $100,000 a year to rent the recplex, and it's only for 1 lane. So they have really skinnied us down because they now have Lindenwood and Francis Howell and all the other high schools that didn't have swimming when we started our swimming program. So we had it pretty nice for a while until they added all those teams. We have 8 teams. And we have lots of things, I believe, that we can do to make that building pay for itself. Could be a partnership with the city, could be senior citizen swims, could be summer programs, scuba diving. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. So we'll need to hire a smart swimming pool manager and have them do everything they can to make that building pay for itself. The worst part about a swimming pool is the maintenance on it, and we don't want to become a lug on the budget. So I'm thinking that there is some partnerships we can develop. I know there's high schools that would love to have some time there as well. So you know, we've tried it before. Last time we got within 1%. This time we're going back to the single facility concept, and not sure where that would be. Before it was planned for North High School. I don't know if that'll be the place or if we'll need some more. You okay?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my computer died.
Oh, okay. So, long-winded explanation. I would finish off by saying that we did have a community meeting about 2 weeks ago. Mike Swearingen was there. We heard from just different members of the community, including our Chamber of Commerce presidents from O'Fallon and St. Peter's. We just asked some questions about a big bond issue like that, and in particular the swimming pool. We got a pretty good enthusiasm. We probably had, I don't know, maybe 25 people there at the meeting. I think it is worth considering again. It'll be up to us to inform the public, to let them know why it's so important now that we're spending money for rent that could go towards eliminating the principal and interest on bonds. In looking at our financial conditions as far as debt goes, we're in really good shape. Our debt service levy is bringing in enough money that we can add payments on another $125 million and not increase taxes. Also, on a new bond issue, you can extend payments for 20 years. Our finances are in good enough shape that we would only have to extend it by 4 years. So right now, we're scheduled to be paid off all of our debt in 2038. We can extend it to 2042, get this new bond issue in there, make lots of improvements for our staff and our students, build up our assets, and really do that for only 4 additional years on top of the debt repayment we have right now. Right now, we have debt out there at about $135 million, with another 50 or so in interest on that. So I think it's a good thing to do to present to the public. I know that we can't let our maintenance and repairs and things like that just go on, or whenever we do come to doing it, we'll have more expenses. So that's pretty much everything. I think it would be something that we would work hard at informing the public what we need and presenting it. It takes 57% to pass. And that's my recommendation.
Any questions regarding that recommendation? None? I need a motion then to approve the recommendation for the no tax increase bond issue.
Move for approval.
Mr. Callahan, second.
Powers.
Powers, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very good, thank you. Jeff Orr has our institutional insurance renewal for you.
In your packet, you have a memo from me. Music is our current insurance provider. They have been for many years. They continue to provide excellent customer service and coverage to the district at a competitive price. So they also provide a rebate to the district. And factoring in the current rebate and the type and level of service provided, I do recommend that you approve the renewal this year. It wasn't, the base premium was 2.8 million, and it actually was a 5.1% decrease from last year's premium of almost 3 million. The 5% reduction is based on a better workers' comp rating. It really was a good factor we got this year, which dropped our premium, offset by some minor increases in other areas. There's also a 10% member credit. I think over the past several years, it's been about a 7% credit. And that goes back to the same, they've had a really good experience with their claims. They have a very large, it's a large self-insurance pool, so then they are able to bring those savings back to the districts whenever they have a good year, we all have a good year, so they spread that across. I'm also recommending that we, in addition to the main policy, we had $2 million in umbrella coverage once again this year, and the premium for that is $62,800. So in total, we're looking with the member credit, the base, and the umbrella to be $2,598,853. So that's my recommendation.
Any questions? I need a motion to approve the music renewal.
Powers.
Powers, second by Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Laura Smith has the early childhood tuition recommendation.
Thank you. In your packet, you have the recommendations for the tuition for this school year in consultation with Dr. Ellerbrook. A bit of review. Things are going great over there. We're fully enrolled again as we were prior to COVID, so that's great news, and the kids are happy and having a good time. Parts of our discussion centered around should we increase those rates for tuition, and in light of the economic status for our patrons, we would like to recommend maintaining the same pricing structure as we've had in the past. And that was delineated in the memo. We would still reserve spots for folks that might qualify for a need-based sliding scale, and then also continue the $100 registration fee that we enacted a couple of years ago. So unless you have questions, I would recommend that we move forward and approve those tuition rates for next year.
I do have a question for you. How many slots total are there?
I'm not certain.
Not certain.
I'd have to
For
get
the
back.
whole school.
Yeah, for the whole school.
I'm not certain. I'd have to get back.
The only reason I ask that is, so the 20 slots that's available for people who are free and reduced lunch with a sliding scale, I think that number is kind of small. Is what I'm getting. I think in percentage, the reason why I ask because I'm trying to compare the percentage of available of those 20 slots. What's that percentage of the whole compared to the percentage of students we have in our district who are on free and reduced lunch? You know what I mean? I just want to see if those numbers were comparable.
Sure.
That's the reason
I appreciate that. I will double check on that, but I do believe we do not fill those 20 slots each year.
Okay.
So I'll check.
Okay.
But
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Would you, before the board votes, would you just kind of lay out for them the difference between the tuition paying people and the special education side?
Sure. Students who are entitled to special education services under IDEA have been identified with a disability, and those students are provided education and transportation free of charge because of the free appropriate public education requirement in IDEA. So all students benefit from being in settings where there are neurotypical students, and so we provide that structure so that there's a good balance of ability levels and good models and good opportunities for all kids to interact and learn at a very early stage how to get along and appreciate each other. So that is basically the rationale behind it, and also at that center we house our parent as teachers, our parent educators, and also do the screening for early childhood there.
Yeah, my point was that the special education portion is fully reimbursed by the federal and state government. as long as you've got that model of students without handicap.
Correct.
Along with students
We
that are
maintain that
handicapped.
ratio.
So we get a tuition to pay for the other, but then the rest of it, of the special education children is fully reimbursed.
Any other questions? If none, I need a motion to approve the 22-23 early childhood tuition recommendation. Ours, second. Callahan, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
JB.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you, Dr. Bright, members of the board. Tonight I come to you with a request to move forward with getting quotes for computers for this summer's purchases. I'm asking a little bit earlier this year than usual because of the shipping timelines on everything technology related. So I'm trying really hard to get ahead of the game as much as I can. We built this plan as part of our 4-year plan. Every year we review. This year would continue the one-to-one program, but I also reached out to all of our curriculum coordinators, technicians, building principals, the technical reps in all of our buildings to get input and determine anything that we need or don't need to replace this summer. So we were actually with this plan able to reduce our total overhead by about 1,200 devices from where we would have been at in the 4-year plan. There's some areas where we felt we don't need to replace this year. We can make them go just a little bit longer. The benefit of really working on our specs on our devices and trying to make them last a little bit longer is starting to pay off for us. So with that in mind, I have a recommendation tonight for 4,383 devices to go out to bid. My hope is that I can get that out before the break and have some bids back for us to discuss next month. But my ask tonight is not to spend any money, but the approval to go out and get requests to give you pricing. Any questions?
If there are no questions, I need a motion to approve. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion by Callahan, second by Helms.
Thank you.
Hey, CB.
This is a quick question, it's not in conjunction with that, but tied to the Chromebooks. What grades do we have for Chromebooks now taking tests?
We're running them 5th through 12th as far as one-to-one is concerned, or take-home one-to-one, sorry. And then we have carts in the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms. So really, we're one-to-one 3rd through 12 with take-home 5th through 12.
I talked to a first grade teacher today that was talking about taking math tests in first grade on their Chromebook.
And we do have, so down K through 2, we have one cart available for checkout in each grade level. Our K2 schools have a few more than that because they have a reduced count. They can also share those 3rd and 4th grade carts. They roll those around from time to time when there's assessments that they need to run at the lower grade level. Does that help answer that?
It's just that question. What it's gonna open up for me is the question more tied into whether or not we should be having those grades using the Chromebooks to the level that we do. And it's not a topic for tonight, but it is something I want to dig into based on the conversations that we had earlier today.
That they're using them too much or not enough?
I would say inappropriately.
I think they're stumbling over a little bit based on the conversation. We can talk about it later.
Okay.
Next item?
Oh, next item. In January 17th is our next scheduled board meeting, but that is Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. We recognize that and do not have school, so I'd like to recommend that we move the January 17th meeting to Tuesday, January 18th at 6 o'clock.
Motion?
Howard.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for a long meeting. Mr. Moore, your comments, please.
That's always great seeing the American Heart Association contributions that the schools make and getting the kids involved and all that. It's always really special time to see that. And I don't remember seeing some of the special Olympics jerseys and things that we did in times past. It was really great to see them. And just another reminder of the community mindedness that goes in with our schools that we're incorporating with our kids to help other people and do good things for themselves and others. Good to see that.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Helms.
It's definitely great to see the guests that we had tonight, especially with these teams, as well as the young man who really impressed me by the amount of money he raised. But I think that was great. It's always great to see people here involving themselves in their school district, so, I think this is just close to another good meeting.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Callahan?
One thing I want to discuss was the community connection by our 4 comprehensive high schools with the needs for No Hunger Holiday. The preliminary numbers have been made available, and our 4 comprehensive high schools provided 38% of all the frozen turkeys that No Hunger Holiday needed. And within the St. Charles County, that was right at about 3,000 households and families that were addressed. This tells me that we are raising children that have a sense of community, empathy, and they have an understanding of the people that are in need, that may be their classmates' families. I'm overwhelmed. I'm impressed. As a director on No Hunger Holiday, I'm not part of the executive committee anymore, but it's always an impressive event that these children provide us with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Yeah, what everybody already has said, all of those were great. That little kid just kind of, he's got some spunk to raise that kind of money. But it's the holidays, and just enjoy the time off with your families.
Mr. Evans?
I'll just keep it short with wishing everybody, the board, Mrs. Office, and across our district a Merry Christmas and a successful completion of the first semester.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Powers?
Just want to thank everybody for all their hard work this semester. It's been a lot on the staff, the teachers, the students, the parents. It's been hard. So I want to thank everybody for putting their all in and enjoy the holidays and relax and recharge, because everybody needs it.
I was going to mention that, so I'm not going to now. But I would be remiss, I know we don't normally respond to speakers, but I think it's important to note that one of the speakers tonight had mentioned that this district wastes millions and millions of dollars in wasteful spending. I want to just commend Mr. Orr for keeping a tight belt on our budget and where we're at. He also mentioned that we have over 19,000 students, and I just wanted to correct that we have 17,765 in enrollment. And then Mr. Emmons' residency, that has been affirmed by our attorney, and so I just wanted to clear the air on that, because I don't like misinformation to get out there. So with that, we need to go into closed session under Missouri Statute 610.021. Need a motion, please, first of all. Powers, second, Moore, and a roll call, Ms. Brown.
Greg?
Yes.
Gabriel? Erica? Mike? John?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes. And we will take a Okay, we are back to open session, and is there any other business that we need to attend to this evening? If there is none, I need a motion for this board to adjourn.
Powers.
Powers, second.
No.
Helms, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourn, thank you.